2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
It's Monday. It's Monday. It really is. 7 o'clock. And that can mean only one thing. It's time for Reading the Signs, where me, Comedy John Ryan, and my comedian pals from all over the world are going to be talking about comedy, well-being, why we do it, how we cope. And that's where we need your help. We need you to send us your top tips for well-being. Be part of the show. Drop a comment in the box on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, on the mensradiostation.com website. It's going to be a great show, much better than last week. What we're trying to do is think exceptional, which, funnily enough, is the motto of WJ, our show sponsors. WJ are the UK's leading road marking and highway maintenance company. They're working with us, we're working with you. Let's get to it. Well, welcome along. It's apparently Monday night, let's pretend. Welcome along to Reading the Signs with me, John Ryan, where every week I'm joined by a guest from the world of comedy. And we talk about life, the world, the universe, how we cope, all that kind of stuff, really. So, let us know what you've been up to today. How's your day gone? I've had a great day. It's a bit cold, though, I'm not going to lie. Although it may be warm, because it's not actually, we're not doing this live, are we? But it's been an interesting time, hasn't it? Because we're now into April. We are used to now, all the COVID restrictions have gone. How are you returning to your previous life or your normal life? Have you been changed by it? Has it done you any harm, any good? Is it something that you miss? Does anyone miss lockdown? I quite like lockdown, the old days. I mean, lockdown 1, of course, not lockdown 2. Wasn't very, very keen on that. But then who was? So if you are out there, do let us know that you're listening. Drop us a comment in the box on on Facebook or on Twitter or on LinkedIn or on Instagram or on the mensradiostation.com website or on the womensradiostation.com website, blah, 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 or on YouTube. Wherever you're listening, just let us know you're there, because it's always nice to know that we've got people listening. This week, I've got an amazing guest. I'm chuffed to bits to get him on, which is why we're doing this slightly earlier than kind of scheduled. I've been friends with this guy for about 20 years now, and I think he's one of the best comics in the country, and I'm sure that maybe a couple of years, maybe 5 years down the line, he will be a household name. He's a really good guy. I'm just messaging him at the moment to tell him to turn his camera on, so that just... There he is. There he is. Pat Monahan, ladies and gentlemen, one of the finest comics to ever come out of Iran and Ireland at the same time. What can I say about this guy? He's funny. He was a great compere. I don't think you compare anymore. A headline act. He can entertain children, old people, blind people, deaf people. I think you are, Pat, one of the greatest, most flexible performers in the country. So we're going to give you a little welcome.
Thank you very much. Listen, John, you're exactly the same as me. I mean, it's like we gigged, as you said there, we gigged so many years together. We've known each other for so long. And it's so funny when you see comedy, and it's interesting because people always see stand-up comedy as, oh yeah, it's a stand-up comedian. They go on stage, they tell jokes, and they don't realize that it's a lot bigger spectrum than that. You've got comics who, from one side of the spectrum, can be shocking or whatever, which, it's not our thing, but it's a good, they can still do that. And then you've got comics at the other side who are family friendly, they're clean. And it's so funny because you're the same as me, where people go, oh yeah, you can entertain kids, grandmothers, whatever. But it's not that we're aiming just to do that. It's just that that's our comedy. You can bring anyone along. You can bring your family, and it's not going to be an embarrassment factor, So it's great, really. It's that.
Yeah, it's take it as a compliment. I mean, like yourself, I've done panto. I remember when we started, people thinking if you do panto, well, you're mainstream, you're a sellout. It's like there's something wrong with you.
Yeah, and then exactly, I had this same conversation where not so long ago when people were going, oh yeah, because you wouldn't, comics from our circuit, our background, where they call it alternative, which again is another misdemeanor. It's another silly thing in itself, because we're not really alternative, we're just comedy. But people would say from our alternative background, they say you wouldn't do panto, it looks down on it. But actually, when people like Peter Kay did it, and I can't think John Bishop, there's loads of people who did it, and then it suddenly became acceptable. People were like, well, actually,
great fun.
Yeah,
just great fun.
Yeah, and it's a good skill to have. You know,
It is.
why would you not want to entertain people from the age of 6 to 106? You know, that's just.
Are you telling me that you can't entertain under sixes? I
Well,
imagine you'll be the world's first interwomb comedian. But before we get into that, I just want to quickly give a shout out to Adam Alexander. Lockdown one was good. The birth of his daughter came along. So 2 years ago. Isn't that amazing, Adam? Congratulations on the baby.
Wow.
But what's interesting, Adam, is how is your child developing? Because if they've been not around people, or if they've only seen people with masks on, how their communication skills going? How is their social skills going? And actually, let's be honest, none of us care because you've got a little girl, and all that matters is she's alive and kicking. Yeah. And we overthink sometimes, I think, when we've got children. John Easton, quick shout out to say hello, John. Thanks for coming along, especially given the time and all the rest of it. But anyone else who's out there, if you want to join in the chat, if you've got any questions, please do feel free to join in. Leave us a comment somewhere. Pat, tell us what you was like as a kid, mate. Were you always like the friendly bundle of fun that you are now?
Well, it's so funny, isn't it? Because I suppose it is like that cliche, isn't it? Where they say comedians are born stand-ups. And I disagree with that. I think anyone can and should do comedy in life. Even if you don't do it on stage, you should be funny anyway in life, in everyday situation. But I think for me, probably similar to you in some ways, where it was, culture, your background is a massive part of that. So when you move from a different country or a different culture to a different culture, you've got to use any way of connecting. And I think comedy was a massive thing because, when I came to the northeast of England as a kid, it was, it was quite funny because it was literally like, when you see programs like Billy Elliot and people go, oh yeah, the northeast, like, they all dig coal or they're looking for metal, that's all they do, they're working still. And pretty much it was. That's what the 1980s were when we came to the northeast of England. It was so funny.
Let me just stop you there. Where did you come from?
Oh, so we came from Iran. So we came from Avos, which was in the southwestern part of Iran. It was on the Iraq border. So we'd come from there as kids. So my dad, he was an Irish fella working out there. But my mum,
what was an Irishman doing in the middle of nowhere in Iraq? That's just so typically Irish.
Well, exactly.
What happened? Was it a stag night went wrong? What happened?
Yeah, exactly. My dad is one of them fellas where, a typical Irish, they get everywhere that the virus can't. It's like, like Corona was spreading around, but the Irish were there first. They just travel everywhere. And it's brilliant because people love the Irish.
What was he doing in Iran, mate? Was he a spy? Is there a spy ring from Ireland?
I know, exactly.
You'd think there to Iran now and merge, blend in.
I'm working for, they don't know if he's working for East or West. I don't know where he's in Russia now. He's all over the place. We don't know where.
What was he doing then? What was his story?
So basically he left Ireland. He had like loads of brothers and sisters, and some of them stayed, some of them went to America, and a couple of them came over to England because there was no job. So when he left at like 17, 18, it was either you stay and do nothing or you go and get work. And then he went to London, one of his brothers there. They tried to get jobs. I think he tried to work at a couple of the yards around here, and then he worked as a trucks or whatever, and then them jobs didn't work out. So his brother went to America, to New York, who I actually went out and saw recently, and he said, why didn't you come out to New York? They're building the skyscrapers, they're working on the skyscrapers, and my dad didn't fancy it. He went east to I think it was Bulgaria and places like that, just working on like any rigs, any oil, anywhere like that, and just working wherever they needed labor. And then eventually ended up going east, further east, and there was loads of oil fields and industry near, just on the Iraqi border, which is literally just before the Iran-Iraq war.
Yeah, I was thinking.
So where we lived, our town, everything there got bombed because Saddam came straight through from Iraq.
He wanted the Monahans, mate.
Yeah. Well, he wanted
to get that talent. He wanted Pat Monahan to be an Iraqi comedian. Let's go and capture him.
My dad, he probably thought, I want the Irish fella, get him taken back to Iraq and he can work on the fields. But no, it was
work on the rigs.
Yeah, and it was mental. But what was interesting about that was so where we grew up in Iran, in Avos, all my aunties and uncles and cousins and all them, I speak to a lot of them. So we actually were actually from Baghdad. They were Arabs. So technically, you know, my grandmother Arab, my granddad, she was actually born in Baghdad, but my granddad was an Arab, but he actually spent most of his life in Iran. So even they were outsiders, really. So they were, because in Iran they're Persians, and there's a big, massive difference between, you know, it's a bit like the easiest way is like, you know, English Scottish or the English Irish, you know, where people outside of the UK will go, oh, you know, it's all the same thing, Scotland, England, you know. Whereas actually, when you live in them cultures, we know what it's like, you know, that it's a massive difference, you know. And it was the same with Iran and Iraq, where, you know, my family are all mixed. So they weren't even really, you know, even in Iran, it was already complicated. And then now this relationship happened where now my family where Western people wouldn't marry, you know, Middle Eastern people anyway. So now you had this equation of Arabs, Persians who are already in conflict with each other, and then now you're putting an Irish fella into this mix. So just,
well, you know what? They love a scrap. The Irish love to fight.
Yeah. They love it. They love a challenge. So then so I had all this culture and I mean confusion, or you had all this sort of mix of growing up. But when the war kicked off in the 80s, and obviously that all got bombed in there, so we came across to the northeast of England. Well, we originally went to the Middle East because you couldn't leave Iran at the time.
Where did you go to? So you're 3 years of age.
Yeah.
And there's a war kicked off, and you've got to move the whole family.
Yeah.
And you've got the whole world to choose from.
Yeah.
And he chose the northeast of England.
Well, yeah, but it's exactly what's happening in Ukraine now. It's what happened in Syria. What's so funny about it is people don't realize that until you see it, when you get the options, people always go, why the hell would you go to why would you go to the northeast? Why would you go there? And you realize that, you know, when there's bombs falling on Ukraine, you don't see them all going, well, let's have a look at the pamphlets. Should we go here? And you're going, no, they just go, let's just go on this bus. And even if it says Blackpool, we're not bothered. We'll just go on this bus and we'll get out of there. And I think it was, and for us, my dad sort of went across to Iraq because he was still doing bits and pieces there. They would take people in, and then Westerns sort of had to leave, but then the Iranians couldn't leave, so we couldn't really leave. So all the family couldn't leave. Then we ended up going across to the Middle East, then eventually to Amsterdam. Then we turned up into Teesside in Middlesbrough, the northeast of England, which is just, I mean, it's just crazy. But yeah, going back to you were saying about where does the comedy come from? And again, I mean, that's not a very funny story. I mean, there's no funny.
That's a very funny story, Pat.
Really?
It's a very funny story. Yeah, oh, goodness. Mate, you, Pat Monahan, by the time you're 4, you've already been in the Middle East, Iran, seen the war, go to Amsterdam, you're not even 4 yet. That's just you all over, isn't it, mate? Never dull, mate. Nothing ever dull. Can I just ask, though, then? So you come to Teesside. Is it just you and your sister?
So no, there was loads of us. So basically, there was.
So in the family, though, is there just?
Yeah. So my dad had to go separate. Then my mum would have took like my brother, because you could only take one boy out at a time. So she would have took my brother and my sister, and then my nana, she would have took me, and then.
Why did your nan take you, Pat?
Because then so she was pretending you've got what, and also I'm probably pain.
So your nana had to pretend to be your mum.
Yeah,
you're a little moon pie, moon pie, Pat. Fantastic. And you're telling me where's the comedy? It's phenomenal. It's fantastic. Your brother and sister got off with your mum. You've got off with Nan. We know who's getting ice cream and spoilt, mate.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Come on, little moon pie, Nanny's little boy. Let me buy you ice cream. Whereas your brother and sister go, Mum, can we have ice cream? No, we haven't got any money.
I know exactly. They've got nothing. They're too busy in Amsterdam selling roses.
Is it just you and your one brother, one sister?
Yeah. And then we got loads of aunts and uncles, and then they've got loads of kids. So they've got like 3, 4 kids.
I'm just gently getting the conversation around to the most protective sister on the planet, which is your sister.
Oh God.
Who once I was at a gig and you were having a slightly tough time, and there was just this woman staring at 2 acts, and I was kind of looking at her, and then I remember her saying to them, wow, you're not more supportive of my brother.
What?
And and one of them was like going, I didn't know it was your brother. And I said, I didn't know you was your brother, but I was very supportive, wasn't I? She went, I didn't know it's you. And I was going to the other two. Haha, see, haha, watch and learn. Yeah, that's my brother there. So proud. She's more like your mum than your sister. She was. It was in King's Cross years ago, and she was more protective of you than any mum would be.
Well, do you remember we all lived in a bedsit? It was like there was 3 of us. I remember we came down, and that was the only way you could get a place, really. You know, back then, 2000s, whatever. It was like, and we would literally be in a little flat. And I remember my brother, we put bunk beds in a room that would be the size of, it'd be the size of maybe 2 meters by 2 meters. And to be honest, to us lot, that's just normal, that's how, but it was funny because you'd meet other people and they'd go, bloody, and they'd come back to the flat and you came back, people would come back, they go, bloody hell, why'd you all live together like this? What's going on? And you go, well, it's the only way you're going to be able to afford to stay.
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, crazy. So it was, and it's always like that, really. I think and that again, that probably comes back to your culture, whatever. But also for comedy, it's great because if you think about it, in terms of comedy, we're traveling. You spend 99. I remember before the lockdown, even now as it's going back to normal, you'd be spending 95% of your time in random towns and hotels anyway. So what was the point of, what a big penthouse for? Even though you couldn't afford it anyway. Even if you could, it's mental. You'd be like a problem.
Why would you? So you come here from, and obviously you were by now probably 4 years of age, so it's a while ago. Did you remember being different or feeling different on Teesside?
Yeah, I mean, the problem was none of my family could speak English or could speak English very well, except for my dad. And then the problem was my dad then had to go and work because he got, the only reason we could get in was he worked for British Steel. And they had Redcar, which is Teesside, Middlesbrough, but they also
red car, as we call it in the southeast.
Redcar.
The red car.
Redcar.
Oh, Redcar.
That's what they call it, Redcar. They go I'm just in Redcar, and they so they had that, but they also had Port Talbot, and then they had another place So my dad had to go to Wales, and this is typical Irish. My dad, where he just because he was struggling, because he had loads of aunts, uncles from my mum's side, and the nana had come. So he went and got a little caravan and just stayed in a caravan outside in Port Talbot, Wales, while he was working there. And then we all stayed in this little house in Redcar, where basically nobody spoke any English, and even us as kids were really struggling. The only person who could speak English had now gone to Wales. So when we went to school, I remember. To be honest, it didn't feel any different for us because we didn't know any different. We still thought we were still in Iran. We still thought we were, you still thought you were as kids.
Right, hang on. Let's just think about what you just said there. Again, bear in mind, there's no comedy in your story. You thought that you were in Teesside in the 1980s, and you thought you were still in a village in Iran that was being bombed by the Iraqis.
Yeah, that's how. Yeah, that's what it was.
And there's no comedy in your backstory at all.
Yeah, but exactly, isn't it? You see all that pollution from the steelworks and everything. You think the orange sky. We're still here.
So then you start school. Where are you? Are you the youngest of the three of you?
Yeah. So I'm the youngest, and this was the problem: was that when we went to school, we couldn't speak English, and the problem was my nana couldn't speak a single word of English. I mean, she would speak Arabic was her first language, and Farsi, Iranian, was a second language, and Chaldean, which is another local language. So she really struggled, couldn't speak any of them. And then my aunties a little bit better, but not much, and my mum not much at all. So it was. I remember when we used to go to school, they were trying to give instructions, and the teachers were totally baffled. They couldn't understand what my parents said, and then they were speaking to us, and we couldn't really understand it. But as kids, you absorb stuff.
Yeah.
I remember the teachers used to always call me mum in or family in, like me nana or whoever. They would just say, "Look, he needs to eat," but we're trying to ask him what he wants to eat, but and I kept speaking to him in Farsi. So I would say, so I just asked, so I could understand what they were asking me, but I would reply back in Farsi. So it got to that point where, they were calling my family, but my family couldn't help either. But they'd come in and then just try and point at things, and do
But
stuff.
didn't you learn? Well, surely growing up in Teesside, surely the first word you learned was chips.
Yeah, I know.
Chips.
Yeah, but we'd never seen chips. I mean, you couldn't get chips. Chips have stopped being produced and made as you go past Poland. As soon as you go further east,
Mate,
there's no chips.
We need to let these Eastern Europeans in. They've never had chips.
Nobody had chips. I mean, it's like, it's such a British thing. I mean, yeah, exactly. You've said chips and fish and chips. We're in Redcar, which is the coast, the northeast of England. And you're right. I mean, that's traditional fish and chips, whatever that. But we wouldn't even
anything spaghetti bolognese and chips, cornflakes and chips, anything in chips. It works. It works as a flavour. So, did you enjoy school then? How long did it take you to learn English?
Do you know what? And then it was a case of, I remember it was all right. It was, it was fun. I mean, you don't realise how it's like everything. Like, you don't realise what you're missing out on or what's good or what's bad until you get older and you look back at it. And I think it was quite funny because, I did it. Primary school was great, because everyone was at that age where everyone was sort of confused by everything, but we just absorbed things. Then it was only when I went to a secondary school, when you get a bit older, and then you realise how bad your English and your grammar was. I was 14 years old when I learned that there was, I didn't know all of the letters, but I learned that there was more than, 17, 18 letters in the alphabet. There was 24 or 26, whatever there is in the alphabet.
What letters were you missing out on, Pat?
Loads. They were just
obviously C, H, I, P, and S. You were missing out on them ones.
Yeah, exactly.
Were you ever saying sentences and like that because you didn't know them letters?
Yeah, well, so basically in Arabic, there is no P. There's no letter P, so you use a B instead. So
a P.
So everything like that. So
you like a bag of peanuts.
Yeah, bag of peanut.
Go and get me a Ben and some Baber.
Yeah, exactly.
Listen, nothing like a little bit of racism on a podcast.
That's exactly what they did. No, but they would. That's just even for me, and it's so ironic because out of all the names, they were going to call me, my middle name is Joseph, but they were going to call me Raf Sanjani, whatever. But then they went for Patrick, which is, my dad's, because my dad's nice, which is stupid because there's a P. I mean, it begins with a P, so none of my family could even say Patrick. So my name is always Patrick. So it was not even, there's no P. So when I went, God, I remember 14, and I remember, and you'll always remember certain things so well vividly. And I remember the time it was like one of these classes, and it wasn't that I was a bad kid. It was just that I couldn't concentrate because I didn't know half the stuff that was going on. And I remember you'd get sent out of class. That was back in the day when they'd send people out. The team controlled the class, and I got sent out. There was another kid. There was loads. You just send out 2 or 3 kids all the time. And I remember stood in the hallway, and then this kid was talking to me, and this kid was actually quite bright. And I don't know why he got sent out, whatever. And then he was starting to teach me. He's going, oh, why are you out? And I go, I just hadn't a clue what was going on. It was doing my head in. And then he was telling me about the letters in the alphabet. We were talking, and that was him. And I just thought, you know what? It's amazing. Out of the bad things happens, you actually get good. You learn from that. And I remember learning.
When you was a kid, then, when you was so at that age, then, did you think one day I'm going to grow up and I'm going to be a welder, or what was your dream?
Well, do you know what? That wasn't even a dream. That was the choice. It wasn't even a choice. That was the route for most people. I mean, in Redcar and Teesside, it was literally either you go in. The top jobs were the jobs that people could do was either in the army. At the biggest recruiter was the army was in Redcar, Teesside, Middlesbrough, Catterick Army Base up the road, Newcastle. So that was the big job. And obviously, I'm not going to go in the army because, I mean, they'd send you back to the Middle East to fight again. I've just come from it.
I'm home.
I know exactly. I'm back now. We're doing Gulf War 2. It was Gulf War 1 back then in 1990. Yeah. So it was so obviously I wasn't going to go in the army. And then the other job, particularly in Redcar, was being in the steelworks, working in the blast furnace where my dad worked, working in steel or welding, pipe fitting, whatever, that was the jobs. And I was like, again, I'm not, I wouldn't, you've got, it's so funny because we come from this background where it's quite tough and you're different, but we're not really, I wasn't really that tough in terms of to think of that's real men. You know, my dad could do that. He would get up at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning, just in with no alarm clock, the boiler suits on, and he'd go out, he'd do some bits of it. Then he would go to a blast furnace, he'd go and work in a place, and come back at like 9, 10 o'clock at night, covered in pure grease and dust, soot, and everything. And he'd have cracks, his fingers covered. And you know, and he just worked, you know, a 14-hour day, couldn't give a monkey, and it was just normal to him. And you just think, poof, you'd be like,
wow.
We can't, you know, it's just a different world, isn't it?
See, I was talking about you on Friday night, and so for people listening, a few years ago, the comedians of the UK decided that they would have a fundraising boxing night where they would get some comics together and they'd all get in the ring. And at the time, they were looking for comics to do it. And I remember someone saying to me, "Would I apply?" And I said, "No, I'm not. I'm not going to fight another comic. I don't. You fight when there's no alternative."
Exactly.
Anyway, who else you got? And they mentioned them, and the name Patrick Monahan came up, and they kind of smiled. And I said, "Well, you know," he said, "You could end up, you know, you could fight with Pat Monahan." I said, "I'm not going to fight Pat Monahan, mate. He's like my little brother." That's first thing.
Exactly.
Second thing, that bloke, he may well be cuddly, friendly, everybody's mates and loves everyone, but he's from an Iranian family, left the war zone, travelled through Europe. His dad's an Irish welder. He was brought up on Teesside in the 1980s when there was no political correctness and racism was fine. There weren't many black people, so he probably was the only minority. That boy can fight, and if he can't fight, he's angry. I ain't getting in the ring with him. Anyway, a couple of days after the fight, after the boxing night, someone said, "Did anyone see what happened?" Well, Pat got in. It turns out he's a boxer, and I'm like, "And why would you be surprised?" Do you know what I mean? And it was just so funny. People going, "Yeah, but Pat, he can actually. He's got a right punch on him." I went, "His dad's a welder. He's from the Middle East. He was brought up, you know, like they thought you get up and just cuddle and dance around." And it's just such a funny. I think you really confused people so much that night.
But you have hit on the head. You've exactly said it there. Where I'm exactly the same as you. Where we don't. Why would I want to fight? We don't want to fight. But when you have to, it was a case of course, where we grew up, it was. I remember, and it's quite interesting where it was a case of we didn't want to fight at all. But then I remember loads of times. And sometimes you block out your mind, but then sometimes you can't. They just come back to you. And there was times where you didn't have a choice. You know, I remember there was even before the Gulf War had kicked off, and as a kid, people would just want to fight with you. And then later on in life, I realized, you know what? It's not because they had something against me. It's because they were scared. They were confused or why this guy's from this country, why is this guy different, why is he from there? But then it's obviously stuff that's going on in their home that's obviously they've got problems as well, you know, with that. And
it's just you being a big cat yet again. It's just you being kind and gentle.
No, yeah, but it was
nonsense. Hippie talk, mate. They're just angry little louts who need a slap.
I tell you what, listen, John, I was honestly, it did take me a while to discover the humor side of it, but I remember you'd be going in just to play football. Again, this is another big thing in the Northeast. You had to do this. You had to have no emotions. You had to go and play football. And I remember going into the sports hall one day, like after school, just to go and play football at this like five-a-side thing. And then just this bloke stood outside, an older kid, and he just went, "You're not coming in here." And I said, "What am I not coming in for?" And he goes, "Because, you know, your lot are blowing us up, bombing us or whatever." And he said, "We don't want any of your lot in here because you might blow us up." And I was like, "Well, you talk like, what's my lot?" You know what I mean? It's like, what, the whole of the Middle East is my lot. I mean, I'm here in Teesside, what? And I'm going to, you know, it was so stupid. And then you would get into situations where you had a bit of anger and then people would want to fight you. And then you got into a situation where you had to fight. You know, people would chase you. And then it was a case of, I can't just keep running. So okay, we're going to fight someone. Then sometimes people would hit you. So then you'd have to hit them back. And that was horrible, but that was part of what life was like growing up in the 80s.
That's your upbringing. Let me just quickly stop you there, just to mention a couple of people. Mike Smashing McGray runs great gigs around Southend and that. Yeah. Talks about the 80s were great for comedy because, like you said, Pat, the 80s were a really, really different time. And obviously, Ashley and Bill saying they will too. That's a reference to the Will Smith thing that we'll get onto in just a moment, which still hasn't gone away. But just at this moment, I just want to just take a moment out, just say let people know that I'm joined this week by Pat Monahan, one of the finest people in the country, let alone one of the finest comedians. Big shout out and thanks to WJ, our show sponsors. WJ, the UK's leading road marking company. These guys, they sponsor me. They're committed to raising awareness of well-being and things like that. So I really appreciate their help and support. Pat, so we've established your background and you've come from there and there and there. Yeah. You've developed maybe a sense of humour as a way of getting in with people. Yeah. Your options were be a welder or nothing else. So then you leave school. What's your first job when you left school?
Oh God, I had loads of
just surprised
jobs as you were growing up. I mean, one of the it's like I had jobs before I even left school. I mean, it was hilarious. We were doing that typical thing, and again, this isn't just the typical Middle Eastern thing, but this is typical Irish family where had the same way. All families were grafting, were working at an early age. I remember we literally so again, this is absolutely bonkers, but we then moved. I mean, Dad he went and bought, like, this is what these Irish fellas would do. They go and get a little bit, there was like an old disused railway line by the side of a motorway, and there was a bit of land, like a couple of acres land. He just went for a grand or two, just went and bought a bit of land and put a caravan on. And he said, right, we're all going to live on here. And up the road, there was loads of people would do it. You just go on, if you couldn't get a house, and you'd live on it. And they were going to throw us off. The council were going to throw us off. They said, you can't live here. And then they went, this is agricultural land. Even though you bought it off someone, you've got to work this land. So my dad put like a scrapyard on it. Like he was going to work, but he just pretend put someone. And they went, no, it's not enough. You need to put like work. You've got to put something on this land to look like you can be working at animals. Mm-hmm. So he went and got a goat from just went and got a mad goat.
Paddy McGinty's goat. I love it.
Yeah, Paddy McGinty's goat on this plot land. So we had to, in the morning, you go and help your dad unload the van before he goes off to the steelworks to do something. Or at night time, he'd go, would you come with me now? I need to go and someone from our house has gone, they're getting rid of an old boiler. Can you clear out this yard? They'll give us a couple of quid. So you go and help your dad load up the van. That was before and after school at night time. Then you'd have to go and do this goat thing. Then I would go and work for some cousins or uncles. They weren't really uncles, but they were just some Iranians who had a kebab shop across like Berwick or across like across like Middlesbrough. So then you have like about 3 jobs. Then I worked up the road in there was like a pub up the road where they wanted someone to do washing the dishes. You do that at the weekend as well as doing that. And then so I did all these jobs even before I'd left school at 16 or 18.
So you left school at 16 then, and what was your first job? What did you do first off?
So then I went I worked at the Quorn factory in Teesside, which is Quorn. Back then, nobody even knew what Quorn was. So it's them. You remember that? Like, we all know what Quorn is now. It's like them veggie sausages. And I used to put them in burgers and sausages in the boxes. So I'd work on a packaging line, and it was hilarious. I'd work there, and I mean, nobody even knew what this was. They were like, "What is this vegetarian stuff?" Like, there was loads of factories along this road where there was. And if you work at a factory, it was great. The money was all right, but the whole point was people could nick stuff, take stuff home. And at this corn factory, no one would take anything. It was the safest factory. Because what's the point of nicking these like veggie sausage or nobody even knows what it was? So I used to work there, and it was great. You'd meet a right load of people. It was fantastic. And then I was at college. Then I went to Liverpool, and I went there. And then
what was in Liverpool? Why did you go there?
Oh, so I went there just to do like a foundation. So basically, the government were paying people if you go and do like a course. So is it like the equivalent of NVQs, foundations? If you go and do this, they will pay you instead of, because unemployment was so high at that point. The steelworks were all cutting back down. There was no other jobs. There was no industry around there apart from that. So they said, look, if you go. What we'll do is, if you're from these backgrounds, what we'll do is we're going to pay people, we'll pay you a grant, we'll give you some money to live and do all this and just go and put yourself in some sort of education, So I went and did that. I did a foundation in Liverpool, and then I stayed there for about 5 years. I loved it, and I was just doing stuff there. And then
so the course finished, and you just went and carried on working then?
Yeah, and then when I went to Liverpool, I was doing. I sort of, while I was there doing the course and stuff like that, then I fell into stuff like, I was looking at stuff like, there was like DJing, like doing nightclubs. There was like these events going on. So I was like flyering for a couple of events for nightclubs. So that's where you'd learn the chit chat, a little bit of banter, like how me and you could do, the chat in the comp. It's almost like comparing on the streets. You're flying with people at the age of 19, 20. You're getting that confidence to chat to big groups of people. You try to get them in the club. And then once I started working my way up with them, then they said to me, "Oh, do you want to do a club night here?" So you could like do DJing. And my mate could actually DJ, but I couldn't. So I just went, all right, let's get some records. We'll get some stuff. And then I started helping on that side, working the clubs. So I got used to the nightlife and I was loving that. That's why I suppose another reason why I do comedy. Because it's brilliant. I like nighttime. I like being out in an environment where there's loads of people. It's great fun. And I remember there's a place called the Bar in Liverpool on Concert Square. And my mate, who's a really good DJ, could actually mix, whereas I couldn't. But they were doing, so they do like a house night or whatever, but then they wanted a 70s night, a 70s theme night. So I would come with some records and then there was a microphone. And then literally what you were meant to do is like do shout outs or whatever, and then get people to drink, do the promotions and all this. But I literally just in the middle, I kept stopping songs just to do like shout outs and chat to people. Look, even though like people were laughing or some people liked it, but then I started getting complaints from the boss or whatever. People just going, can you just play music? Because they come here to dance for music. Because every time you stop a record and you're talking, people can't keep dancing while you're just talking. Oh, like Janice has brought her friends along. Janice, it's lovely to see you. Just in the middle of them.
Brilliant. So then where did the comedy come from? What made you start doing comedy?
God, okay. Well, look, from school, I would definitely say from school, there's about 3 different reasons. First one, probably the same as you, is like we grew up with Dave Allen was on the TV. Do you remember Dave Allen? And you'd see like someone like your dad would watch it. Even though I couldn't get all the references, you'd see like a grown man, like quite a tough bloke who had no emotions whatsoever, quite a physical bloke.
Yeah,
lad.
Roaring laughing.
Yeah, and you'd just see him in tears laughing. And at no other point would you ever see any emotions like this. And then you'd watch this Dave and think, what is this guy doing? He's amazing. But he wasn't, but you wouldn't see him as a stand-up because he was just a bloke sat there who's just drinking. And I'm thinking, who is this guy? This is amazing. So one of the reasons is growing up like that, and I think subconsciously, but also consciously, I was watching Dave Allen and thinking, God, I'd love to do a job where I just get paid for talking. Not stand-up, but I just talk.
Yeah, just talking. Yeah. Okay, then, so that's one of your reasons.
That's one of the reasons. The other reason was back at school, again, was I would say probably about 13, 14 years old. And I remember, and it sounds quite dark, but it is quite a nice thing. I remember, again, through them times, where lads during and it was, it was rough. I remember one time getting punched so hard where I used to fight back, and you'd be in situations where people would chase you in the corner, and you'd want to, older kids, and they'd want to fight back, and you'd obviously have to fight, and you'd have to stand up for yourself. But I remember one time getting punched so hard that it was like, like someone switched the lights off.
Yeah.
And I don't know how, but I managed to stay on my feet. But everything, it was like, and it was, and I can still, like a bright day, but it was like a bright day and you're in the yard, bang, and then everything had gone black. And I thought, someone literally just put me back, and then it come back up. And then I thought, at that point, I thought, do you know what? I can't keep fighting. If I keep fighting, I'm going to get killed. You're going to end up with brain damage. So I thought, okay, so I've got to look at my other options there. So I thought I could try and fight back all the time. Then I thought, do you know what? There's no point. Instead, and I learned this, was when people attack you or they want to say something at you, if you rally back up, that's what they want. They want you to come back and they want you to come back. Whereas if you laugh at them or you make a joke of them, then they start to break. They like, oh my God. And then that makes them feel uncomfortable. And then other people start laughing. So then I started thinking, do you know what? Actually, I can just start.
It's your superpower.
Just start using comedy instead of my fear. It's just pointless. You're not going to be, you can fight so many people, but then you're not going to, am I going to fight 600 people for the next 3 months? You'll be dead by the time you're 15. So it was a case of, okay, right, let's learn. And then, so I think by the time I was 15, 16, 17, I still didn't know what it was. I didn't know. I just used it as a defensive mechanism. And it was quite funny. It was only when I was probably about 16, someone said to me, one of the guys who I wasn't particularly friends with, but he just said to me, I said, I don't know why. I don't understand how you laugh all the time when you joke about this, when people are saying this and you're doing this about you like that. And I said, well, what else do you want me to do? And I thought, well, I love it. It's quite funny. And then you just go, and then I could see him getting angry. And I thought, so it is working. You know, you just got to do that. So I suppose that's my second thing is that, yeah, your comedy was a great
defense.
It was, like a shield. And then the third thing, which is probably the most important thing, and this is for everyone, I think, in anything in life, is because it's the closest thing to actually doing something that I do love, which is talking and people. You know, these are the only things. Like if I had to do any job in the world, if comedy didn't exist, I mean, comedy would be the only job I'd want to do in the world. But if it didn't exist, you know, it would be working in a supermarket on a tannoy, you know, where, you know, work in a kiosk where you get to see people. There's people come in. How you doing? You're all right? And chat.
Ladies and gentlemen, Price Chalice. Hey, happy birthday, Chalice. Happy birthday. Where was your first ever gig?
God, first ever gig was in, and you never forget your first, do you? Like it was literally, and actually you'll know this. A few people don't remember this gig. Do you remember the Purple Turtle
in
Islington? Yeah, in Upper Street. Do you remember? Yeah. And I always say this to people, and not many people remember, but do you remember, was it Paddy?
Paddy Bramwell's.
Paddy Bramwell's. What a lovely one. Do you remember? He was like a street performer or something, wasn't he? And so people always say, what was your first gig like? And you go to gigs now, and even if you, and you've seen it, if you go into like someone's doing a new material, like, or they're doing something, they're all got this amazing speakers, high tech, they've got everything. It's brilliant. Yeah. But we started, and you remember that one.
Yeah.
Bramwell's, bless him.
Glass window behind you.
Yeah, glass window, no backdrop. There was a pallet. Do you remember the wooden pallet? You put the wooden pallet on the floor. The door, and this is how bad it was. The door would swing into the wooden pallet. So when people would come in, they'd bang the door. And these poor comics, like all of us, had literally, like me, well, that was my first ever gig. But most people there done 1, 2, 3 gigs max, 4 gigs. So they're all nervous already. And then these doors are whacking in. And I remember the compare. So I had to, probably the same as you. Did you like? I sort of lied because when he was saying, because he looked quite efficient when he was running it. Because I turned up because I didn't know anyone in London at the time. Turned up, obviously, you know, and I just went in there, sat down. And I thought, I'll have a look at this, see what this is like, and I watched a few people coming on, and it was nice, you know. But I could see you know, they were all quite new. And I thought, oh, this is great. So it's all new people. So I said to them in the interview, I said, look, could I do this? Could I put my name down to have a go? And he said, yeah, but normally, have you got experience? Have you done it? I went, yeah, of course. I've done it up north. And I've never done it before in my life, of course. But because we've got a northern accent, they just assumed, oh, yeah, this guy's probably done 12 years, the working man clubs or you know, gigs up north. Because London was so separate to like Manchester and Newcastle back then. And so basically, put my name down, and then he said, yeah, I'll put you on, whatever, in the gig in the second half. And he said, and I remember these words. He literally said, everyone gets 5 minutes. He said, look, if it's not going well and you panic, try and stay on for at least till 3. Just don't come off before 3 minutes, right? He said, stay on for at least 3, even if it's like that, but just try and do 3 minutes minimum and get on there because, you know, 3 to 5 like this and come off. And I said, yeah, brilliant. I said, okay. And I said, give me a flash, like, you know, whatever, 5 minutes or whatever. He said he'll wave when your time, whatever. And I said, yeah, brilliant. And I remember sitting on a table, and I can remember exactly, as you said, there, the pallet, the doors there, glass window. There's three guys with leather jackets sat at the bar with their back to the gig. They're literally just facing the bar. And apparently they're regulars everywhere. They would literally just sit, not even look at the comedy. And then in the audience, there was probably about 18, 20, no, there'd be about 20 people in the audience. But I didn't realize that 18 of the people in the audience were all acts. So like 9 had been on in the first half, 9 in the second half. The only 2 people that weren't acts were a Portuguese couple, a young guy and a girl, like obviously on some date or a holiday. And the only reason I know that they were Portuguese because I sat on their table because I didn't know anyone, and everyone's obviously sat there. So I just sat next to them and I said hello, and they couldn't really speak English. So the audience was literally made up of, if you took out all the open mics, the audience was 3 bikers who weren't even watching the gig, and was 2 people that couldn't speak English. So that's your first. And I went up on stage, but it was great fun. I remember doing the set, going through everything. And then I remember seeing Paddy Bramwell's at the back, he's waving his thing. And I thought, bloody hell, is that 5 minutes now? Have I done work for 3 minutes? And he kept waving. And then I came off and I said, thanks, and it was one of them gigs, where great for the first 10 seconds. I think the audience, oh, great, there's a bit of energy. But I loved it. I mean, obviously the audience probably didn't love it at all as much.
Yeah.
And I remember coming off and Paddy said, well, you clearly enjoyed that. I said, yeah, I did. I said, it was great fun. I mean, obviously the audience didn't get all of it, but I enjoyed it. And he went, yeah. He said, you did about 7.5 minutes before and I was flashing you. You were still on. And I was going, yeah, but, and he goes, also, you're talking too much. Just do a little bit, pause, let them, and then
learn the stage skills.
Yeah, learn it. And
learn the stage skills.
Well, we don't.
Because I think I met you in 2000.
Mm-hmm.
And I always remember you having broken legs and going up on stage on your crutches at the brew house.
It was, you remember? Yes. Oh my goodness. I twisted my knee playing football. Do you remember?
It wasn't going to stop you. You'd get up. And so you've always struck me as, because, you've been very successful, I think. I think it's fantastic you do Panto. And you had your TV thing that you won. And 2001, you won a TV thing. 2011 was the other TV thing. And you've done Edinburgh. You're an Edinburgh veteran. You're doing a national tour of the UK. This little 3-year-old boy that fled a war, he's here and he belongs and he's fitted in and he's now bringing happiness, joy, laughter, love, all that to people who used to want to beat him up and didn't want him to be here. And I just wonder then, are you happy? Or do you have darker times? Do you have down times? Or what do you do when those things hit you?
Yeah, I mean, of course we do. I think there's no one. I mean, if anyone ever says, "Oh no, everything's great," then they're clearly the ones that need the most help. I mean, we've all met people like that, and we go, "Oh yeah, everything's brilliant." Like, of course, it's not. There's always going to be problems. And I think, look, you talked about it. You touched on it at the beginning there, where you talked about the pandemic and the lockdown. And to be fair, yeah, the first couple of weeks of the lockdown was quite nice, but I remember loads of. The last couple of years. I remember everything where, you go through certain things in your life where, your personal life, relationships, whatever, your family, things like that, where certain things break down, people don't chat to each other. And I remember also with this pandemic, it didn't help because there was a point when all of our work stopped. And it is so funny because the thing is about comedians, and it's probably going to sound like a cliche, but it's not. But comedians need an audience more than an audience needs a comic, because we need that. That's what we thrive off. And this is even without the financial aspect of it. And I remember that was probably one of the hardest things, where during the pandemic or the last couple of years, where you realize, oh my God, you haven't spoke to certain people and people have now gone or moved on or things have happened in life. And then also, your career, your gigs, that's all stopped for now. People didn't know what was going on, and then it literally stopped. And then you had, then it just went from one thing to another. And then I was moving at the time as well, a place, and it just felt like, everything was crashing. And you think, Jesus. And then
so what did you do to cope? How did you get through it?
Well, do you know what? I think it's one of the things where, you've got to be a fighter. You've got to keep going for it. You can't let it get you down. But one of the things, and it's probably one of the best bit of advice for myself, and I don't know if it would, hopefully it would work for everyone else, but I always think, when people keep saying, you got to keep fighting on, of course you do, but people keep going, keep swinging. You got to keep swinging at it and keep going. And I think that's a load of rubbish. You can't just keep swinging. What you got to do is you got to keep hitting. You've got to look. And just what you're gonna do, and it's so true in life where, you've just got to focus. You've got to say, look, okay, don't worry about the things that you can't control. There's no point. I mean, I remember worrying about certain things where it's out of my grasp. It's nothing to do with me, say financial or this or home life or whatever. That's me sitting here worrying about it. It's not going to make any difference whatsoever. All it's going to do is just make you more weaker and vulnerable. So the only thing is just focus on, and there's no point swinging at everything, where people go, oh yeah, I'm just going to keep, because all you're going to do is just tire yourself out. So you just focus and you go, right, I'm just going to hit the things that I need to do. How do I get back on track financially? How do I get back on track with your home life? How do I get back on track with this? How do I get back on track focused on that? So you've really got to, in a nutshell, I would say, look, just keep don't keep swinging, but just keep hitting, just keep focused, and just do not worry about the things that you can't control. There's no point whatsoever in that.
Is that then what helped you get through it? Because like a year and a half into lockdown, did you do other work during lockdown or when you were furloughed? Or
well, yeah. So basically, I was quite lucky in one way where I managed to learn how to do stuff online, and that was quite good. And then you get bits and pieces, but it wasn't the same as, of course, it's not going to be the same as your income of going out and about and doing stuff. So I still managed to then, luckily, get to do stuff online, and that helped, and started doing bits and pieces, learning how to do Microsoft Teams and Zoom shows and stuff. Then, managed to get a little bit of furlough in the second lockdown. So then it was great. You managed to sort of cope with that. But okay, financially, it was never going to be the same. But then you can't complain because, look, the whole world had stopped. But mentally, that was the hardest thing, of course. It wasn't, financial was a big thing, but mentally was the biggest thing because, it really made me think about all them, friendships, relationships, people I knew from like in my 20s or 30s, not even that I didn't think was that long ago, but people who I'd lost contact with. And then during the second lockdown, I felt really bad about it. And then things started to run over your head about regrets about I didn't go to my mate's wedding, and I wanted to, but I couldn't because I had a gig in bloody Liverpool, or I couldn't do this. And then there's loads of things like that. And then I started to message people to say, look, I'm so sorry I hadn't seen you. But and what was funny was I remember reflecting and messaging about, I don't know, let's say I did like a dozen or 2 dozen people.
So you said a dozen, so 50.
So let's say, yeah, exactly.
Janice, did you message Janice?
Yeah, Janice, I messaged Janice from Liverpool, said, happy birthday, love. You won't remember me from the bar back in 1997. But I messaged, and it was funny because I got back in touch with people, but and out of all the people I messaged or whatever, and I sort of did a half apology sort of thing, say, I'm sorry to see you and all this, and kept touch. And then about half of them got back to me, which was nice. Or most of them just said, yeah, don't be silly. He said, yeah, we know what life's like, and we've moved, we've done this, and oh, brilliant. And I think that was quite nice. It was quite therapeutic in that way. Your mates. And I think this is what has taught me now, is that, at the end of the day, and again, this is like a cliche, but it's true for me, where at the end of the day, as you get older and you go to the grave or whatever, I'm not going to take any money with me. What you take with you is their memories of people you've met along the way, friends, people like that. And I think that's the most important thing. And I think it's taken a pandemic for us all to learn that, really, hasn't it? That, God, we took so much for granted.
And now that we're back, what you got to look forward to? I know you got your tour going on at the moment.
So the tour
up the country.
Yeah, there you go. That's brilliant. So it's been absolutely brilliant. And what's been so nice is that, the audiences, people have come up, they're even more excited, because I thought, I think we've all noticed this, haven't we, where you thought that, people are going to be like, oh my God, people are so used to staying at home, that we got comfortable, didn't we? I mean, I remember when we were doing these Zoom shows and, online, where you're thinking, this is great. I literally, I'm never going to be late for a gig again. I just walk to the kitchen, open up the laptop, do the show, close it, and then there's no driving home. I'm here for the rest of the night. And I was worried it was the same for audiences after lockdown when we came out. I thought no one's going to leave the house anymore. Nobody wants to. But then actually they did. They just come out in their droves. Everyone's like, come on, let's get out. And it's been brilliant, really. So yeah, that's.
So the tour's going up and down the country. Dates on your website?
Yeah, dates on the website. So they're all coming through there. So I've got loads coming up. Middlesbrough Town Hall, I'm back there. I'm in Liverpool.
Going home. Would you ever do a gig in Iran?
Do you know what? I would, yeah. I think the only problem is, and I've been asked a few times about this, whenever someone has an idea for a show or whatever, like, it's always like the TV thing, they'll go, oh, do you know what we'd like to do? Send you back to Iran with a camera or to do something like that. Are you mad? The thing is, they're arresting people. And also, even though, I'm not political, the whole point is that comedy, because you work in comedy, they don't know what a stand-up comic is. They just see you as media. You work in media, so you're instantly straight away going to. So it's basically, it's going to be a show of me being arrested, trying to do stand-up. Listen.
Pat Monahan gets arrested. Genius.
Yeah.
Pat, listen, mate, that hour has flown by. I could talk to you for days, pal.
No,
it's really good. Thank you so much for your time.
And
great advice for people as well. Let's hope that we catch up soon. In the meantime, any dates there, just stick them on my social media pages. Mate. I'll always forward them on to the 3 people that follow me.
No, you got loads. That's brilliant. You're doing such a good. Listen, John, you were doing such a good job. More people need to do stuff like this. That's the problem, isn't it? That people don't really talk about with comedy. It's always like that, where people always think, "Oh, I'm going to do a little joke. I'm going to distract. I'm going to deflect. I'm going to do this." But actually, no. I think it's more interesting. I'm actually quite interested to hear about people's everyone's background, their life. Because
just how did you become you, and how do you cope with you? And for people to realise that, you did find lockdown hard. You were abused as a kid, like racially and physically by lads. You did it, but you've got through it and you keep going, and that is inspiring for other people, mate. And you've done it with a big cheesy smile on your face.
Yeah, but
you take care.
What is the point of not smiling?
There you go. Hopefully, I'll speak to you soon, buddy. Take care.
Definitely. Cheers, Thank you, John. Thanks for having me.
Well, that's Pat Monahan. Honestly, one of the finest comics in the country. You could spend hours with him, hours. He's just always upbeat and full of beans. And as he said there, he's not had a very traditional middle-class comedian's upbringing. He had it rough. He came to England as a refugee and has now become one of the most successful comics in the country. And he's bringing joy and laughter to people who possibly their families didn't want him here in the first place. But that background of having that Iranian, Irish, not fitting in, not belonging, is something that many of us from immigrant families can often experience. But like most things that you experience, you don't have to experience on your own. There's always someone out there who's got some advice or some help or something that they can offer that can be useful, can help you to get through life, get on, to prevail and to thrive. Every Monday night we're here at 7:00. We talk to comedians about just their lives, really, and we touch on how they cope and how they thrive and survive. But for some people, it's always going to be difficult, and we've got to accept that life isn't always easy, and life isn't always a box of chocolates, in the words of Forrest Gump. Every week, I ask my guests for little tips on well-being, things that they do that help. And some of the tips are great. My own beliefs are that you reframe unhelpful thoughts, be in the present, get some good sleep, connect, live a healthy life. Pretty straightforward. Other performers have different ways of doing it. Kane Brown talks about being selfish and putting yourself first. Marcus Bergman talks about yoga and eating well. Dave Sleet, the expert, of course, talks about being the difference. Eric, he talks about finding something to do and just push on with it. So it's got to be something that you can do and you can keep up with. We are going to be here every Monday night, like I say, at 7:00. So please do join us, do come along and join in the conversation, join in the chat. In the meantime, in between shows, do listen to the sister station, Women's radiostation.com and mensradiostation.com. Every day there's something on there. There's always a show that's going to be engaging, informative, and dare I say entertaining. Not that that's the most important thing. If, however, you do find life is getting a little bit tougher, there are people who really can help. There's a lot of expertise out there. You don't need to suffer on your own. If you know someone's going through a tough time, reach out, put your hand out. If you're going through a tough time, reach out, put your hand out. Time to Change are a fantastic organisation. I'm not sponsored by them or connected with them in any way. But Time to Change have got a lot of useful stuff on their website, as have Mind, the mental health charity. No one has to face a mental health problem alone. So when we do talk, it's really important that you realise that we're not practitioners, we're not consultants, we're not clinically trained. We're just people who get through life in our own way, and we found our own way of dealing with it and things that work for us. We'll be back next week. Well, that's the end of another episode of Reading the Signs with me, Comedy John Ryan. We're here every Monday night at 7 p.m. talking with comedians about mental wellness, mental well-being, and just trying to get the conversation going. What we're trying to do is show that it's good to talk, and we're also trying to show that everybody can go through the same experiences. A massive thank you to the WJ Group who sponsored the show, showing their commitment not just to mental well-being, but also to reaching as broad an audience as possible. It's great to be part of the mensradiostation.com family, so do check us out on the website, on social media. We'll be back next Monday. You take care. Stay safe, everybody.